Hey everyone, welcome to day 9. In this one, what we're going to be doing is really solidifying our landing page. This is going to be significantly easier than the last few days, mainly because we're pretty much getting close to wrapping up everything that we need to do. But of course, the landing page itself needs to be better. As in, what I really want to have happen is, obviously, you go to a landing page and you go to a featured product, some sort of featured product, which we'll discuss how that will work. And then we want to also be able to either get their email if that product has no inventory left, or have the option to allow them to back order it if there's no inventory left. So both of those things are critical to making this work, because especially if you're selling only one product, right? It would make sense that if you're selling one product at a time, that you're going to want to run out of inventory as soon as possible and then still capture that interest that might be there for that single product, right? So let's go ahead and do it. It's not a lot to talk about. It's just literally code and Q&A. So let's go ahead and jump in to the code. All right. So first and foremost, what we need to do is we need to change how our main homepage is currently working. So in Bootcamp URLs, right now it's just rendering out a random template. Of course, that's how I want to change, or what I want to change. So inside of products, I'm going to go ahead and create a view here, and we're going to call this the featured product view. It's going to take in request and args and keyword args, and it's going to return render, request. And then, of course, the way we get this featured product, we've already done it before, but I'm going to go ahead and do it again. And we'll say query set equals to product.objects.filter and featured equals to true. So I'm also going to go ahead and say product is none. And the reason for this is because if for some reason I have no featured products, I still want this page to render because it's a home page, and I will have some sort of fallback that I'll need. Maybe it's an email, something along those lines, right? So an email collecting form. So let's go ahead and give that as the product itself. Next thing is I'm going to go ahead and, well, another option actually is to say if not qs.exists, we could actually go ahead and say qs equals to product.objects.all. So it's kind of up to you, which this, of course, is giving me a different product then. I'm actually going to leave that out and actually have product being none if for some reason there is no featured product. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and say if qs.exists. So if there is a query set, then I'm going to go ahead and set the product equal to qs.first. Hopefully at this point, this is all review, right? This shouldn't be any really new things here. So what I'm going to call this now is product and featured.html, featured. And the context I want to have in here is a few things. And number one is going to be the product, of course, so the product object itself. A lot of times you would actually see this in as just simply object, but I'll leave it in as product. Next, what I want to have eventually is a form of some kind. For now, I'll just go ahead and say none. And then I also want to know whether or not this product has inventory. So I can say has inventory here, and we can use product.hasInventory. So this is definitely one way on how you could go about doing this. So inventory, that's a model method that we created before, and that's this right here. Okay. So instead of actually having that inside of my context, I will just access it inside of the HTML itself, inside of the template itself for those conditional statements. So we'll bring in that context. Okay, cool. I'm going to go ahead and remove this because it's not code that we really need. I just wanted to mention that you absolutely could use that instead of this option. Okay, so now we've got to create, actually we should call this products, just like what we did with all of our other templates. And usually what you do with this naming is based off of the app name itself. Cool. So inside of products, I'm going to go ahead and say featured.html. This, of course, is going to be essentially the home page, right? So we're going to go ahead and extends and base.html. And then we'll go ahead and do block content and end block content. Cool. So now, if product, then we'll go ahead and use it. Otherwise, we will put something else in here. Okay, so the product rendering, the things that I might want, we'll go ahead and just give product.title. And maybe we'll go ahead and give the description of the product. So product.description. And I think we have the potential for images. So if product.image, then we'll go ahead and at least render out the image path, which we'll take a look at in a moment. Okay, so just a number of things in there for that featured homepage. Of course, we will definitely have to clean that up a lot more as we go forward here. But now that we've got that, let's go ahead and bring this into our primary URLs here and import that view and featured product view. You could call this home view, you could call this landing page, but for now, I'm going to go ahead and call it featured product view. Okay, so we save that and let's take a look. And it looks like maybe my server's not running, so let's go ahead and make sure it is. No, I do actually have my server running here. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Yes, so perhaps I don't actually have a featured product. Maybe that's the problem. So going into my products, I have a few products in here already. I'm going to go ahead and make sure one of them is featured and refresh. And sure enough, one was, I didn't actually have one featured. Okay, cool. So now I actually have to be able to check things out. But before I can approve the checkout part, what I want to do is I want to actually come back into my products and have a few more fields in here that I might want, right? So one of them being can backorder, right? So do we want to allow back orders to happen for this field? And we're going to give a default being false, right? So can backorder is definitely a Boolean value that you don't necessarily have to have, right? It's really simple. It's just like, do we want this to have a checkout process after the inventory is done? That's essentially what's going on here. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and run python manage.py, make migrations, and python manage.py, migrate. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a property method, and we're going to define this as can order. Okay, so the reason I'm calling this can order and also as a property is because it's very similar to can backorder or featured in the sense that it's basically like a property that we would want on our field anyway. As in, it's not an instance method. We don't actually have to call it to know whether or not it can order. So first off, we'll go ahead and say if self.has inventory, we can return a true false value. So I'll go ahead and say true. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and say elif self.can backorder. Then we'll go ahead and return true. Finally, I'll go ahead and just return false. Right, so the default is returning false. Now this, of course, is meant to allow us to then come into feature.html and say, you know, purchase. So we would come in and just use product.can order as a if statement. So %if product can order. Then we'll go ahead and do something with the order part, right? So I'll just come in for a moment and say href equals to, I think we called it checkout. Let's look in the URLs. Yeah, so we go to checkout here. So this would give me a link to purchase. Okay, so we refresh that on our page. Let's see if maybe I have server needs to be running, of course. You know, when in doubt. Oh yeah, I spelled property incorrectly. Oops. So property. There you go. So now it is a property of that class. We refresh in there. In this case, this one can't order, right? So I use this first one and I have no inventory. So let's go ahead and do, you know, 500 things of inventory and it's $20. And so now in here we can per chaos. Oh man. Okay, so purchase. There we go. And let's actually just put the price in here as well. So product.price. There we go. And I'll just go ahead and put a $sign in front of that. For US dollars, in my case. Okay, so if I click on that, it should take me to the checkout. I believe this is the correct one. It looks like it is. But unfortunately, it's actually not based off of that product. It's just the general checkout. So we actually do want that based off of the product instead of just a general checkout. So let's go ahead and do that now. And what that means then is in my orders, I'm going to go ahead and go to views here. And we want to actually change what the featured product order is going to be. As in, we want to adjust how this part works. So the big question is, how do we go about doing this? Or what should we do to make this work? Well, there's actually a few different options that we have. So one of the options is to use a wildcard path, much like we have with this product right here. So in other words, I can actually use something like this where it's going to check out here. But that unfortunately means that we are exposing that as a potential URL, right? I mean, it's not the end of the world, but I actually want to just stick with checkout and download, and it's going to go based off of a session instead of anything else. So when I go back into that checkout part, so let's come back in to my orders. When I actually come in here, what I want to do is replace all of this with at least some sort of session ID. So I'll go ahead and now say product ID equals to request.session.get and product ID or none. And then we'll go ahead and say if product ID equals to none, then we will return that same redirect that we had originally. Okay, so with that, then we would actually filter this down, and the primary key or the ID, let's actually leave it in as the ID, is equal to what that one is. In fact, we probably wouldn't even do it this way. Instead, what we would do is go ahead and say product equals to none, and then we'll do a try block of product equaling to product.objects.get ID equals to the product ID. And then if that fails, then we will also return that same redirect back to the home page. Now we would actually want additional messages in here. I'm not going to do that right now, but there is something in Django called Django contribs, so messages.success. You could actually do stuff like that, but it's a few different configurations that I just don't want to handle just yet. So I'll go ahead and get rid of this. And now that we've got this checkout, what we should get is a constant, redirect back to this homepage. So if I click on this, it shouldn't actually go anywhere. It actually is redirecting, which we can see in the request itself. So notice that initially we are getting just, the homepage, and then we try to get the checkout, and it goes back to the get, and so on. So it is actually redirecting right now. So of course, that means that in here, we want to actually add in the product itself. Right, so in the product featured view. So this is actually where we want the product can order. So if product can order, or rather, we would want to say if product can order here, or let's actually adjust this a second. We'll say if product is not equal to none. So now we'll say if product can order. Notice that I'm not using parentheses here because it's a property of this. Then I will actually go ahead and set that session for the product ID. So now what it is the product ID is product.id, and then the request.session of that product ID is equal to that recently set product ID. Okay, so the key thing is can order, right? And again, when we actually go to the ordering, we do want to have some message at some point, right? So that's definitely something that we will want to put in. But for now, this is at least showing me that, hey, now that you can order, that I can actually go forward with how I want to execute the view as well. So that also means that in here, I'm actually going to say can order equals to false, and then literally change can order being product.can order. This way, I can actually come in here now and use something like that. Now, what this actually does is actually make it a lot cleaner inside of here now, right? So essentially, now what I can do is say if can order. I now know that there is a product in there because can order cannot be true if there's not a product in there. So I definitely know that this stuff is okay. But more importantly, what I also know is if it can't order, then we can do the other condition statement. So basically I'm just having a bigger condition statement that surrounds the other one. So it's kind of a bit confusing as to how we might want to go about doing this. But essentially, if it can order, then I will have all of the product ordering stuff. If it can't order, then I'll have to handle what that would be. Okay, so I will absolutely use something that makes this a little bit cleaner in a minute. But for now, we're going to bring it in just like that and get rid of that original statement. Okay, cool. So if the product can order, great. If not, that's okay too. Okay, so now that we've got in here, we can click on this. Now I can actually go back and check out. So this is also true if I change the product itself. So if we come in here and we give this being featured, and let's give it some inventory and a price. Let's give it a different price. Really expensive item there. And then I'm going to make the other one not featured anymore. We'll go ahead and save that. And what do we call this one? Django and Docker, a simple introduction. Okay, so yeah, so this might actually be that. It's just got the wrong title there, which is interesting. So product.title here is not coming through. Did we give it a different name? No. So that's odd. Product.title. Okay, so we're going to have to solve that in a minute. But now I can go and purchase, and at least I see the correct totals and all that for this checkout method. Now, one of the downsides of this method is when we actually go to the order, if the inventory is not there, or if they can't order, if they can't do a lot of things, then this page should actually adjust for that. So we actually already have set that up, right? If we go into our orders, into forms, we had this right here. If it doesn't have inventory, well, this actually means what we can actually change this to, instead of has inventory, is can order. And now we can say this product cannot be ordered at this time. Okay, really simple, but a nice, clean, easy way to make sure that if for some reason, while someone's just about to check out and I say, no, you cannot, well, maybe I selected the wrong product, perhaps? I don't know. Where'd that product go? Oh, it is Hello World. Haha, I did have the right one. Okay, so if for some reason we actually don't have any inventory, it's no longer featured, we come on here and I try to complete this order, it should prevent that from happening. That's it, right? So we now have two ways of preventing somebody to order something we just don't want them to order. And that's pretty unique for this particular project, but it definitely would work on bigger projects as well, right? So bigger e-commerce, more full-fledged e-commerce applications as well. Cool. So now that we've got that working, I'll go ahead and just call this product 2. Come back in here. Yeah, there we go. That's correct. Okay, so now we can go ahead and purchase this, and we can do whatever we need to do. We can just complete that order, and we move forward. Okay, great. So now what I want to do is actually solve the challenge with the shipping and billing address, right? So in some cases, we might want that shipping address. In other cases, we might not. And since they're not required, we can actually adjust how our view works with those things. So inside of our templates here, or excuse me, the order templates, the form itself only has those two fields. So we actually don't need to render out that form if the view cannot be ordered, right? Or if that product cannot be ordered. So yet again, we can actually use the product ordered part inside of this request, and we'll come in and say can order and product.can order. Oh, that's a mistake. That should not be can order, but rather is digital. That's the key there. That was a silly one. Okay, so is digital then would come back into our product model itself. And then the way I'm going to declare whether or not this is digital is if it has media. That's it. So we'll go ahead and add property. And now define is digital self. And all I'm going to do is return self.media is not equal to none. right? So that Boolean value will give me a true or false value, and this would allow me to adjust how my orders are coming through, right? So whether or not it's a digital order, and if it is a digital order, then I actually don't need to render out the standard Django form, right? So that also means that in here, this form valid is not necessarily going to display those items, but we will have additional issues that we'll have to come up with a little bit later on whether or not this digital item should work. So that's actually getting a little ahead of ourselves on this one. So I'm actually going to save that for tomorrow as far as solving the shipping addresses being in or out there, because that's kind of polishing things off. So I got a little bit ahead of myself there, so we'll come back to it. But for now, what I want to do is actually add in that inventory wait list. So back into the product, let's go ahead and only have, you know, maybe one item left. Okay, so we save this and we go to order. I'm going to purchase it, complete that order, and we'll go into our home page here. And of course, that's not showing up any longer. So I actually want to now jump into my emails, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new model specifically for the inventory wait list. So to do this, there's a few things I need to import. So from django.contrib.auth, we're going to import the get user model. I'm also going to import from products.models. We're going to import our product itself, whatever the product model is. And now I'm going to go ahead and create a inventory wait list. And this is models.model. And the product itself is going to be models.foreign key of the product. And on delete, we will use models.set null, because I do want to keep this waitlist entry regardless of if that product exists. The next one is going to be our user. So this is actually not nearly as important of a field for a waitlist, but I do like having it just in case we know that this user has been actually a user. So blank equals to true and null equals to true. And then on delete again is models.set_null. And then finally, we want our email field. So models.email field. This one is required. Absolutely. So timestamp is the last thing. So when they actually did this, so date, time, field, and auto now add equals to true. Okay, so hopefully no big surprises here. We definitely need to associate this to some sort of product because they're on the wait list for it. And let's spell foreign key correctly. And then the user, if they are logged in as a user and they're doing this, then great. We want to know about that. Finally, email field and then timestamp. Okay, so with that, I created those models. Let's make sure that it is in my installed apps. And it is. So I'll go ahead and run. Oh yes, so user is not defined. So inside of models.py, of course, we have to actually use, I'm using the wrong one. Hopefully some of you caught that, but let's go ahead and do from Django.conf import settings. Whenever you use a user in a foreign key, you want to use settings.auth user model every single time. So I'm actually glad that I didn't initialize that user class because it would have caused other errors that we don't want. Okay, so let's go ahead and run python manage.py, make migrations, and then python manage.py migrate naturally. Okay, so with that still there, let's go ahead and actually make the form for it. So forms.py. And in this case, the form is almost identical to our order form. There are some things that are different about it, but I will copy the order form to bring it in here. And of course, instead of order, we're going to be using inventory waitlist as our object, our actual model, right? So inventory waitlist, and then the order here, we'll call this email, get rid of the billing address, and there you go. Right, so obviously we actually don't need if it can be ordered at this time. So, you know, that's fine. We can get rid of that one. But maybe we do need the product at some point in here. Like, hey, this product doesn't exist or cannot be back ordered. Actually, that's probably what we want, is if not self-stop can back order, then this product cannot be back or Actually, that doesn't make sense either. So I'll get rid of that. That's a silly one. Okay, so what we've got here now is the ability to create our inventory form, our inventory waitlist form. So one of the things that you might want to have is a check on how many emails this person has submitted to be on the waitlist. So I'll just go ahead and say email equals to cleaned data.get email. And then I'm going to go ahead and say my query set equals to inventory waitlist. So I'm quite literally looking in the database now for objects.filter. And we're going to go ahead and say product equals to self.product. Right, so we set that up here. So we definitely want to set that product in here for that reason. And then email iExact equals to email. And we'll just go ahead and say if qs.count is greater than 5. We'll let them put 5 entries in there. We'll now raise self.add error. And it's for the email field. And we say 10-4, we have your waitlist. Entry for this product. Kind of being silly, but okay, so you've probably haven't seen this add error. This is a really cool feature that Django added more recently. It's essentially saying that we're going to be associating this particular field. We're going to give it this error. It's very similar to doing clean email and then inside of clean email running raise forms dot validation error. It's very similar to doing that, but it's actually on the field itself. If we run a raise forms dot validation error, it actually doesn't go on the field. It goes on what's called non-field errors. So that's actually where it goes by default inside of the clean method itself. Whereas this will definitely go on the field itself and cause that error to be raised. Nice and easy way to do that. So there we go. So now we have this waitlist form. So let's go ahead and grab this. And I want to bring it into my view for the product ordering itself. Right? So that landing page view initially, and then also the order form, we don't necessarily have to do that because the order form itself, you would probably just go back to that home page. Right? So it's definitely something we can add, but it's kind of redundant at this point. So from emails.forms, we're going to go ahead and import that inventory waitlist form. So now let's go ahead and add our form context. And so just like before, if can order, now this is actually where I could initialize this form, right? But perhaps I want to always render out this form. So it's really going to be up to you on how you're going to run this form itself. But in here, I'll go ahead and say request.post or none, and then product equals to the product itself. Okay, so I guess the biggest caveat to this is to tab it in for inside of the product not being equal to none. And then going back up here, setting a default for that form being none. And so now we actually can use that form inside of my context. Okay, so now that we've got this, what we can also do then is in here is say if form.is valid, then we're going to go ahead and say obj equals to form.save commit being false. And then obj.product is equal to that product, right? So we did pass it into the form itself, but we didn't override any other methods in there. We just added it to the init method. So now we actually assign it here. And the next thing is if request.user.is authenticated. Older versions of Django have a parentheses after that. That's like one of the smallest changes, but definitely one of them. So we go ahead and say obj.user equals to request.user, and then we run obj.save, and then we return our redirect of, waitlist. Let's say like slash waitlist success. Cool, simple enough. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's go back into the template for it inside of featured here. So if they can order, then we're going to show this stuff. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and do form as P. So I'll refresh that in a moment. Let's go ahead and double check things. Let's run the server here. And there we go. Okay, so now I do have an email in here, and I can potentially use this email. and have it actually check out all of the product related things. Okay, so this is where I want to stop for a moment and be like, okay, I'm actually starting to get very redundant with a lot of content. This content right here might be incredibly redundant. The form itself, or rendering out a form, might be incredibly redundant. So let's do the form first. And what I'm going to do here is inside of templates, I'm going to make a new folder called snippets. And inside of this folder, the very first one I'm going to do is form.html. And inside of my forms.html, I'm actually going to remove this entire form here and bring it into form.html. And this content right here, what I'll do is say if submit btn, then we will use submit btn. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and say, send or submit. Let's just call it that. Make it nice and simple here. Okay. So now with that, that means in forms.html, I'm going to go ahead and say include snippets form.html with form equals to form and submit button equaling to, well, whatever you'd want. In this case, I'm going to leave it out. Okay. So with that, that also means that perhaps I have other places that I can use this same thing. Of course, we just did that and featured this right here. So now I can bring that same thing in, and now I can actually add the submit btn being some sort of variable that I want in here. So let's go ahead and say add to waitlist, something like that. Okay. This also means in orders, my checkout, I did have this order form in here, right? So there was a number of things that perhaps I want to change how this works. Certainly do still want all of that. So maybe I want to put this a little bit differently, right? So maybe I just put it down here and use that same snippet inside of my checkout. So I'm just really not repeating myself over and over again, right? So this is something we'll clean up a little bit more in the next one, like I mentioned already. But now what we can say is in here, just say complete order. Okay. And then in this form, I'll just get rid of that form, save it. And now we've got add to waitlist. So let's bring in some inventory. Let's make sure I can still order stuff. So I'll just bring in one item in inventory and refresh in here, go to purchase it. Notice that the subtotal and all that stuff is now up here. That's really not that big of a deal, I think. But really, you might actually have the subtotal and all that over on the right-hand side with some CSS and all that. That's, again, something we'll cover a little bit later. But now I can actually complete that order as it goes to success. And then now my homepage has a waitlist. So if I do some fake email and hit add to waitlist, I get redirect is not defined. That's fine. So let's go ahead and add that one. So inside of emails, nope, not emails, inside of products, where we actually handle that form, which is right here, we called redirect. So we need to import redirect here. Great. And now inside of emails admin, let's go ahead and add that waitlist thing in there. So from .models, we're going to import the inventory waitlist, and we'll do admin.site.register of that inventory waitlist. Simple enough. Refresh in there, inventory waitlist object, and there you go. All right, so it's actually in there. And let's try it again. So I'll refresh in here, hit continue, gives me the success call, and yet again, success call, and yet again, success call. I should have done 2 times or something, because what I'm trying to do here is get a validation error from this. And I think maybe now. There we go. Exceptions must derive from the base exception. Okay, so that is a peculiar error that I'm not sure why that is happening. So we're just gonna, solve it the good old-fashioned way. So inside of forms, I'll have to look into seeing why that's the case. So I will come back and use that validation error And we'll call this the error message equals to that. And yeah. Okay. So go ahead and just raise the original validation error that we already know about and run this again. And there we go. So we now have that error showing up. And if we inspect the element here, so what we see here is non-field, right? So the class itself is a non-field class. It's not actually happening on the form itself. Now, again, this exact same thing can happen on cleaning the email itself, but I really wanted to show you that feature. I'm not actually sure why it's not working. So that's something we'll have to address in the next one as well. Okay, so that actually coming soon thing is not quite done. Okay, so I want to take the concept of including a snippet and bring that into the product details as well. So, you know, if it's main project type items that you're going to reuse throughout the project, then I like using the main snippets for folder here for those kinds of things. Honestly, form.html is like one of those that you'll use throughout the project, so it makes sense to put the snippet in there. But if it's specific to a type of model or a type of app, then you often put it inside of that. So in here, I'll put snippets, and this is going to just be the product_detail.html. And that is actually going to be covering all of the related detail products itself. I did have the detail snippet, right? So this is in here, and it's roughly what I was originally talking about when I did that, right? So that was the goal with that. But I think it's actually better to have it inside of folders themselves so that we're not, overdoing it with detail underscore or anything like that. We want to actually be more specific with what it is that we're doing for any given snippet. So that being said, let's go back into featured, and I'm going to go ahead and cut or copy these things out, bring it into this product snippet thing or this detailed snippet, and clean this out a little bit more too. So image source equals to product dot image, and we also want to use dot URL here. That of course is if that image is even in there, right? And we also had a condition for if there was even content. Hopefully every time you do have content. So if product.content, then we would have that in there. And then the other thing is if show price, as in if we include the snippet to show the price, then we will also use some sort of format for the price as well. And here we go. Put a $sign there and product.price. And same idea with if show inventory, product.inventory. Okay, with no $sign. Sweet. Okay, so with that, now that we've got a new kind of snippet, I'm going to go ahead and delete our old one. And inside of detail now, instead of products detail snippet, it will just be products snippet / product _ detail. Okay, and this was, I think, mostly on the home page, but we will leave it like that. And notice that there is object.title here. We shouldn't need that any longer. In fact, we shouldn't actually need anything related to the home page either. So I will get rid of all of the home page stuff as well and just leave it as this. As we notice, this detail and featured are starting to get a lot similar to that, to the original thing, right? So they're almost the exact same thing. So this is now where I actually do want to keep them in as the exact same thing. So we'll come in here, and now we'll say if can order, we'll go ahead and have in that order form, or the snippet, the include snippet itself. Actually, this is not for ordering. This is for the waitlist method. So the for ordering part was the checkout. Here we go. So yeah, just had that a little bit backwards. And then we'll go ahead and say else and put that in there. Okay, so now we've got the details. the ordering, and then a checkout. Either they can check out if it can be ordered, or it's going to add a waitlist item, but it will always show the product itself. Now I'm actually going to quite literally get rid of the featured file here. We no longer need it. It was just sort of a placeholder to improve everything else. You totally could keep it as featured, but I'm not going to do that. It's just not necessary to be that redundant, right? So we can add just detail in here. And so hopefully now what we've got is on our home page, we're getting snippet incorrect naming there. Okay, so let's go back into that detail, and this should be snippets. Refresh, and there we go. And so now if we go into any given product, we should also see that same thing. So product 1, that does give me the image of that one. Okay, so then product 2, this one does show me that product and also add to waitlist. So in this case, it doesn't actually have the form itself. So if it can order, then that, and then also if form, then we will render that out. A lot of little kind of conditional statements in here, just to add to the user interface. So that image is giant, right? So it's way too big of an image for this. So we certainly have to solve that one. I'm not going to do that just yet. But the home page now has, well, it actually should have the same detail look. So let's go back into why we're not seeing that. So the product itself, we've got if it can order. Yes. So the product should still be coming through either way, right? So if it has the inventory, so let's go ahead and make sure that everything's saved up. That's peculiar. So, product detail view. We've got our product here. Product can't order, doesn't delete or remove that product at all. Perhaps it's the featured. No, it's not the featured. That's strange. So it actually should do that. Let's see if the that's working. There we go. Featured product view, products detailed. That's strange. Let's go ahead and try that again. Refresh the server. That often will solve some of those issues. And it's saying that the product itself is not coming through. So I actually know why. This should be object, just like we did in the detail view itself. There we go. So now it's working. Okay, cool. So the image itself is way too big. So let's just do a really quick fix to that inside of the image. And we'll just give a style, and let's do width of, I don't know, 150 pixels. Just an inline style. We'll fix all those things tomorrow. Okay, so we've got product 2 here now. Add to waitlist, and of course, if I go into product, products 1 or 2 or any of them, it's just giving me some basic details about that product. So no waitlist items on there. Of course, we could totally add that in the future, but for now, this I think actually works pretty well. Okay, so the one part of this thing that I actually do want to have is perhaps having videos or something like that related to these products. So inside of our models for products, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add just something for like a YouTube link. So let's go ahead and say video link equals to models.text field and auto now blank equals to true, null equals to true. So since we've got that, let's go ahead and run python manage.py, make migrations, and python manage.py migrate. Okay, so the reason I created that snippet, this is part of that reason, right? So now that I know I have a small change in the model, now all I need to do is actually change it in the snippet itself if I want this thing to be rendered, right? So if product.video link, then we'll use what embed, the YouTube embed. So if you actually go onto YouTube to share, what you can get is an embed link much like this, right? So this actually is all of the embed stuff you would need. And I can actually just copy that video link and use this. right? So we could add additional conditions and say, hey, is this even a YouTube link? But even if it's not a YouTube link, a lot of the other video embed links will actually work here in an iframe. So now that we've got that, let's actually add in a video embed link. Now again, this is literally copied and pasted directly from YouTube's share embed section. So going back into our products, and our server is probably not running again, and it's not. Let's run that server again. And here we go. So into, let's say, product 1, I'm going to go ahead and add in a video link here. I made it a text field so that I don't necessarily know how long some of these embed links might be. YouTube ones aren't usually that long, but if for some reason you need to use a really long one, then you can. So that's actually the incorrect embed link. This is the correct one. It's really just whatever the name of the, or the ID of the video is next to all of that stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and make this featured and can back order. So we save that and we refresh in here. So now I actually have my URL there, and maybe I don't have a purchase price on here, or maybe I did something wrong with the price itself because it's not rendering. So we do want to actually show that purchase price. So let's go ahead and take a look. So inside of my snippets, if price, we got product.price. Oh yeah, so maybe we weren't showing the price, that's one thing, but the form itself on the detail should actually show that. So right here, yeah, that's our problem right here, is we did change the context variable to object or back to object, so that needs to be object as well. And so we'll refresh, and now we've got that purchase price. So we've got videos, images, and a purchase price here. The last thing that we need to test today is whether or not back ordering works. So let's make this to 1, and we'll go ahead and save this and refresh in here. I will order 1, complete that order, and now we come in here, and of course there is no inventory left, but it is allowing me to purchase it. Right, so let's just verify that that's the correct order or correct product, not that we're using a different product. So this one's not featured, so that's good. The next one, let's see if this one's featured. That one is featured, and it does have 0 inventory, so we would have seen a wait list anyway. So now I can still purchase this. All right, so it's definitely still coming through. We look at our orders. There are all of our orders. And let's purchase it again. And there we go. So yep, definitely coming through. Of course, now, if they can back order, we probably want to at least say, instead of purchase, say back order. So that's this link right here. So let's just change it based off of an instance method itself, right? So we've got can order being there true, right? So let's go ahead and say property and def order button title, something like that. And we'll go ahead and return. Well, initially it'll be purchase. Otherwise, if it can back order, or rather if inventory is 0, and it can back order, so if it can still order, we'll go ahead and say if self.canOrder and not self.has inventory, then we'll return back order. If not self.canOrder, then we'll return unavailable or something like that. Actually, maybe just an empty string or cannot purchase. That actually shouldn't even render, but it's nice to have some sort of fallback in the case that it does, if we make a mistake somewhere. And now we come in here and just say obj or object.order button title or checkout button title, either one. And let's make sure everything is saved up. Models in here and not has inventory. Okay, so it looks like it's still saying purchase. So maybe it does have inventory and we're testing incorrectly. Yeah, so inventory is -4. So this should be giving me true. Ah, yes, this is not a property, but an instance method which it probably should be a property as well, but we'll leave it in as an instance method. So now that we've got that, now we should actually see the updated one. There we go. So back order. Cool. And then if I add some inventory back to it, like 500, and we come in here and there we go. Purchase is back. Okay, so a lot of like coming together of all the things that we did. That's why I kind of really went through a lot of those things. Right, we really flew by on all of that. A big part of the reason is because, well, we've done this. We should already know how to do everything that I just did. There are a couple things that might be a little new, but for the most part, this is exactly what it is that we need to do. So that's it for day 8. Now I'm going to go ahead and answer some questions that you might have related to what we did here. So yeah, thanks for watching day 8. Tomorrow, the final bootcamp day, we're going to just be cleaning everything up. We're going to actually add in a framework for CSS. So every sort of little bug that still exists, I'm going to try and solve that little bug or whatever that bug might be. So a good example of that is actually how it looks. That's one thing, right? So it doesn't look that great. Another thing would be the actual success pages. We want to update and change those a little bit. And of course, a lot of you might be wondering, well, what about credit card transactions? How do we actually accept credit cards? Unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, a big part of this bootcamp was meant to really focus on Django's interaction to making all this stuff happen. To use the vast majority of credit card processors on a web application like this, you actually need to use JavaScript. And so I didn't want to actually make an extra layer of confusion without getting into learning JavaScript altogether. So that's why we're actually not going to be implementing the credit card in all of this stuff. I think we covered a ton of things that are like getting you right there to building a almost production ready e-commerce page or single page e-commerce application. Yeah, we're going to get there. I promise you. It's going to happen sooner or later. It's just not going to happen in this bootcamp. It's not going to happen tomorrow, you know, because like the actual credit card accepting of credit cards is fairly straightforward to do because of things like Stripe and PayPal. It makes it a lot easier, but it's still not something that we could cover in an hour. I mean, today was mostly like just little itty bitty things, and we almost went an hour just for that. So yeah, if you have questions, please ask them now. I'm actually not going to go back to the questions. So all the new questions are the ones that I'm going to be going off of. So the ones maybe, yeah, so maybe Kevin McAllister. Welcome, Kevin. Welcome back. If I tried the VIN plugin for VS Code, the VIN plugin, I don't think I have. Thanks for the question, though. I should be using plugins, that's true, for while we're coding, because I do have, every once in a while, I make these errors and stuff like that. But the reason I am not using those things is because as a beginner, maybe you shouldn't be using them either. Maybe you should actually try your best to type everything out and run into errors on your own. And I wasn't surprised. Kevin, you meant Vim, so VIM plugin for VS Code. I haven't used it. Thanks for the question, though. Cool. So can I share best practices in Django for good performance in production? I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people have for good performance is actually how they query the database. So a lot of times you'll do really inefficient queries to the database, and it makes your page load a lot longer. So select related is one of those things that I recommend that you do, and also not just querying the database when you don't need to. That's another thing that is pretty cool. So yes, thanks for that. And let's see here. Why wouldn't you store your CSS images, static files in your Django project, but instead, so you can store them in your project, you just don't want to serve them from your project. So when it comes to CSS, images, JavaScript, video, Django itself, the Django server, the server that's going to be running Django, it's not efficient or probably not secure for Django to be the one actually serving all of that stuff. So instead, you want to have a separate server that's dedicated to serving static files themselves, which you don't have to use those services that I mentioned, but they're just the easiest ones. You could definitely set up your own static file server, or you can use Nginx or Apache to serve those static files as well, which could actually live on the exact same server. But whenever in doubt, you just don't want to use Django as the static file server. Thanks for the question. Hopefully that answers it. What will be the subject of the next bootcamp? I'm actually not sure if I'm going to do another bootcamp, to be honest. It really depends on how much people have interest in it. I'll probably still continue to do live teaching of some kind, but a full-on bootcamp, I'm just not sure yet. Because there's a number of glitches that happen. Glitches, when I say glitches, I mean production issues that happen throughout the bootcamp that I find it a less conducive way to learn the material, although I think these live Q&As are really valuable. So maybe there's some sort of hybrid where I literally show a recorded lesson that I have hopefully as polished as possible, and then we talk about it shortly after, much like what we're doing right now. Because, you know, the other day I had the garbage collector come by my studio, and I had to pause for like 5 minutes. Like that's not fun, right? That's really not fun. I don't like doing it. I don't like doing it to you guys. So there's those things. But then also when I was doing the testing one a few days ago, I think on Monday, so like day 6, I ran into a very, very minor glitch, a very minor error that if I was producing a recorded video, I would have just stopped the video, found the error really quickly, and then came back and actually told you what the problem was in the video itself. And it would have cut off, I don't know, 5-10 minutes of that actual lesson itself. Because while I'm recording, I can stop, right? When I'm broadcasting, I can definitely stop, but I'm trying to make this as dense as possible. So on rewatches, you're not seeing me go, oh, hang on for 10 minutes. Let me fix this, you know? So yeah, I'm not sure if there'll be another boot camp. It really, really depends on a lot of things. And maybe I just need a shorter boot camp, maybe just like a few days instead of 10, because we just covered a lot in here. There's so much more that I want to cover with Django for you guys, but yeah, I just haven't really fully decided on these boot camps. The other thing is, if I'm not creating fully polished courses, then, you know, perhaps I'm missing like actually helping people in another way, right? So if I actually spent 3 to 4 hours actually just recording a course versus preparing for a live bootcamp, you know, maybe I would be able to make a lot more courses for you guys and just release that stuff. So anyways, thanks for the question. Long answer for you. Always long answers. You're learning React right now from my playlist. Thank you. I'm really excited for the next version of Try React because it covers functional components in React, which I think are amazing. Definitely better than the class components, although I think learning the class components is really important too, to also really appreciate how those functional components work with the hooks and all that stuff. But thanks for watching. Can you override the string method in models next time? That is incredibly easy to do. I think you can do it yourself. Just define 2 underscores, str, 2 underscores, and self, and just change it how you might want. Just return a string. That's all you need to do is return a string from that string method. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I know. I won't be covering deployment in this one. Deployment adds a whole another heap of issues that would add at least a few days to this bootcamp. So I do cover deployment a lot. So the MVP landing project that I just released a few months ago, that one covers a lot of the things that we did here, but it also covers deployment. So it actually gets your application in there. So everything that we've done so far, you can absolutely jump over to that and cover deployment on your own. So yeah. Okay, so choosing between Django or Express, this is kind of out of the context of the questions, but I will address it. Django is in Python, Express is in JavaScript. That's the biggest difference. The next biggest difference is Django is batteries included, as in it has all of the features you would need to build a web application. Pretty much. I mean, there might be a few things that you might need to add to it, but Express.js, you pretty much have to add everything. So yeah, let's try and keep these questions to what we're talking about today. Can we use React and Django without creating an API? Well, yeah, you can render out React without actually using anything from Django, of course. But you should actually create a REST API that React can actually consume, or at least a WebSocket. So either way, it doesn't have to be a REST API. You can also use GraphQL. That's another thing. But something you need something to actually interact with the backend. Okay, so hi, I asked you yesterday how to add many fields like images and stuff like that. I actually did tell you how to do this yesterday. Model form sets. So go back and watch that one if you didn't. Can you make a variable array and add many URLs and choose it in a template? So a list of items. So in Python, it's called a list, unless you're using NumPy, in which case that's an array. Can you make a list of items and add many URLs and choose from it in a template? Yeah, so in a field, a choice field itself, yes, you absolutely can do that in a choice field. Look up the documentation. It's actually pretty simple to do. So thank you. All right. I think making many projects live would be really good. Something that can be done in 2 hours. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. You mean like not actually teaching it, just recording and doing it? Is that what you mean by that? Thank you for that one. For the next bootcamp, you can include Django. Maybe you didn't listen to my rant about the bootcamps themselves. What's better, class-based views or function-based views? Function-based views are really easy to get going. Class-based views are harder to get going if you don't understand them. So they both have their place, right? So class-based views remove a lot of redundant code when you do standard operating things. So I pretty much mostly use class-based views in my Django projects at this point. But the reason I used function-based views here is because it didn't add another layer of complexity to this whole project. So yeah, thanks for the question. How can we represent a database view in the Django models? Example, inventory would be calculated in a materialized view in the database. Do we have a read-only model? What are your thoughts? Yeah, this is a little bit more complicated of a question. So you can do read-only calls from your Django database for sure. So Django can also read from a read replica database as well. So it'd be a different database with different model managers and different query sets. If you're able to do it more efficiently in the database, you should do it in the database and then just have Django do the read-only view, and maybe just have another table with those, or actually we already did the table with all the calculated fields, so you totally could do that. Thanks for the question. That's a good idea for sure. Yo, what's up? How long does it take to build a basic web app with Django? How do I even answer that question, buddy? For me, a couple hours, right? Maybe less than that, maybe 30 minutes. For a beginner, it might take a long time to make a basic web app. But I actually created this whole bootcamp to make it as easy as possible. So maybe it's only 10 days, which was roughly about 10 hours. So that's a lot of time. If you think about it, really the basics of the web app could be done, I don't know, in a couple hours, maybe less. Why not create a tutorial on multiple user types in Django? Thanks for the suggestion, appreciate it. And just got on a lunch break from online school. Welcome to another online school, I suppose. Thank you for watching or coming in here when you have time. Do I plan to show Django? I think I have a lot of things planned in the short run that I don't know if I'll be able to get to Django. Thanks for the question. Okay, so it looks like we're kind of getting out of the context of the bootcamp itself and starting to just jump into just general Q&A. So I'm going to be jumping off in just a moment. This is a good question. So what is the collect static command in Django? So actual command is python manage.py collect static, which is how you wrote it. The command itself, it actually looks inside of your Django code, all of the apps themselves. It looks for the static folder, the static files folder, and then it will collect all of those files and put them on your static root folder or into your static root folder. That's all it does. All right. Okay. Yeah, so looks like we're not actually asking questions related to the bootcamp itself. Now we're getting off topic a little bit, which is fine. I'm happy to get off topic, but I really want to answer any questions related to the bootcamp, but it seems like we don't have any. So thanks for watching today, guys. I hope that you got something out of this. And here's one. Web Sprinter. Is the property setting you use today the preferred method? Well, using properties, it really depends on what it is that you're trying to do. So if you're calculating something, I wouldn't use a property method. But if it's a Boolean value that you're trying to get back from it, then yeah, you can totally use a property method. But if you actually need to filter it, so if you need to filter it like a query set, if you need to filter that entire query set by can order, then I would make it a field itself. Or, well, actually you can make it a query as well. But just in general, I would say that when you do property methods, the property shouldn't be doing that much stuff. It actually should just do only a few things and do those few things well. If it's going to have to calculate stuff or do several steps, then just use an instance method instead of the property itself. That was a good question. Okay, so yeah, thanks for watching today, guys. Hopefully I see you tomorrow as we wrap up this Django Bootcamp. I realized that today we pretty much did a recap of a lot of the things that we've already done. So this is a good question. I'll actually answer this one before I leave. How is the Django Bootcamp different from the Try Django tutorial? Which one should we watch? The Try Django tutorial goes into a lot more depth overall. The Django Bootcamp goes into depth on a lot of the fundamental aspects of building an e-commerce application. The Try Django one does not, right? So we did inventory, we did products, we did digital downloads. Those sorts of things aren't actually available in Try Django. And I don't remember if we went into as much depth on the testing in Try Django either. So you can definitely do both. They're different projects, so you will learn from different things as well. All right, guys, so thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.